Hey guys, welcome back to the Digital Pen Pals podcast. My name is Zach Schertz, and today we have an amazing guest, but I'm also here with my co-host.
Hello, I'm Tux or Lincoln. How's everybody going today?
Doing pretty good. Today we have an amazing artist that goes by the name of Johndrawing on multiple social media accounts. John, I should have asked you how to pronounce your last name.
DePianto.
DePianto. Okay, awesome. So we have John DePianto today on the podcast, who is a phenomenal artist, and we'll kind of let you explain what you do, John.
Well, first off, that was incredibly generous. Thank you.
You're welcome. You deserve it, man.
Thanks, man. Yeah, my name's John. I am an illustrator. I work mainly freelance, but I love doing narrative illustrations, and I also teach art to kids on the side.
That's awesome. Yeah, so I found John as we kind of try to like explain like how we meet these other artists, because we kind of try to make sure that people understand that like if you want to like learn from other artists and stuff, or reach out to people, you totally can. It's not like it's a no. You could totally reach out to people and kind of get feedback from them. But I met John through TikTok. I started following him, and I just loved his artwork. If you guys check out his links below, we'll have that in the description. But he has some amazing work that I would describe as very like pastel watercolor, that is very voluminous and kind of texturized at the same time. It's super wonderful. But that's how we kind of got into contact. And I've been following him for a while and thinking about, I'm like, man, one day we're going to get him on the podcast, get to talk to him and kind of, pick his brain a little bit and figure out kind of how you think,
Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you taking a look at my stuff, and I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So, I guess first things first, like, how did you kind of get into all of this? Like, did art, was it like a childhood thing that you started doing artwork, or when did it begin?
Yeah, I mean, I would always draw as a kid. I remember in kindergarten, was this really cool kid named Sam, and he would draw Ghostbusters, and all the other kids were super into it. And I was like, oh man, Sam has the secret ingredient here. I gotta start drawing Ghostbusters. So yeah, and then from then on, I was hooked, I guess. Yeah, but as far as like studying it academically and getting familiar with my foundations, that didn't really happen until around college age.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as growing up drawing, that was something I always loved to do.
That's awesome. Did you just, I mean, I assume you're just like most of us, like drawing in like notebooks and maybe like the every now and again like sketchbook, right?
Yeah, definitely. I would get in a lot of trouble as a kid for drawing in the margins of my paper and all that.
That's like literally every artist. It's crazy how like
everybody's
funny...
told us that.
Yeah. It's like, don't draw on your papers. Oh, sorry. Later becomes an artist. Oh, that's why. Yeah.
Yeah, man. It was just anime eyes, like in the corner of the math paper. Everything that would make a seventh grade math teacher mad.
That's awesome. Was anime like a big influence for you besides Ghostbusters?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Even nowadays, I'm a huge fan of manga, anime, media that's kind of influenced by that. It's definitely in the DNA of what I try and do, for sure.
That's awesome. What animes were inspirational to you? Do you have any like top picks?
Yeah, as far as the stuff that was kind of ongoing in terms of what kept my interest, I would say probably One Piece, Samurai Champloo, Cowboy Bebop, a lot of Naoki Urasawa stuff like Monster, 20th Century Boys, Pluto, even some older Tezuka stuff, but I'm not really familiar with his whole library of work like a lot of people seem to be.
Okay. That's awesome. Yeah, because I was scrolling through your Instagram, and I'm seeing a lot of that influence now that you talk about it, which is why I love talking to artists, is because you can look at their artwork and kind of like, oh, this is so cool, and wonder what inspired the kind of style that you end up going into. And now being able to hear that, and looking back at your artwork, it's definitely something that you can see, especially in some of your fan artwork. It's definitely like, oh yeah, now I see it, now that makes more sense.
The Giorno
Yeah.
caught my eye specifically.
Yeah, that was that kind of what do they call that? That kind of showed my power level right there. The Giorno.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also love children's book type stuff as well. So there's kind of a weird fusion of that and narrative illustrations that are geared more towards picture books and children,
Mhm.
like Maurice Sendak and all those dudes.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, and I feel like, at least with children's illustrations, like I feel like um, a big staple of children's illustrations is watercolor, and that's primarily what you do, right?
Yeah, I was definitely inspired by my illustration teacher who is like a fantastic watercolor painter who did a lot of work for children's books. And I think that I kind of borrowed that, and it somehow became a weird amalgamation with like being influenced by anime and manga and all that stuff.
Right. That's cool. So that being said, you went to college then, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. Do you mind where I ask where you went?
Yeah, I went to the Academy of Art in San Francisco.
Oh, fantastic. What was that experience like for you? Because I know a lot of artists are, just trying to determine whether or not, like, do I go to school for art? Do I just learn stuff online? Like, what are the pros, cons, I guess?
Yeah, for me, it was a pretty positive experience. I don't think I would be at the skill level that I'm at if it wasn't for art school. That being said, I have had a few younger people ask me before, like, if art school is the way to go. And I always kind of felt like it's sort of a personal decision. Like, for me to say something like, yes, everybody needs to go to art school, I feel like that'd be maybe a little bit unfair or kind of a blanket statement.
Mhm.
Right.
Um, yeah, yeah, everybody's kind of on their own journey with that, I feel like.
Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, I think it kind of depends. Like, for me, I needed like some sort of structure to like tell me what to do, and like to figure things
Totally,
out,
totally.
learn the basics of like things that I just never really paid attention to, like composition, or just like how to like make things like contrast work, how colors together can like help influence contrast, things like that. I think were like really influential to me in helping me understand things, and just the ability to like experiment, and aside from just your typical drawing or illustration classes, like actually doing stuff like sculpture, other things were really helpful in like understanding, like, oh, volume, this is interesting, like that's how this works. And I don't know, just the accumulation of things you can do is really good. But yeah, to each their own, and it definitely depends on what you want to do. And because I don't always think that the degree really is going to really do much for you, but I feel like the experience is more valuable than the piece of paper that you get at the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree, especially in terms of it being a gateway to experiment with different tools and different concepts that maybe someone would not normally stumble into on their own. If I was left to my own devices, I'd be doing small ink drawings in my sketchbook and never trying anything in color. But a lot of professors and peers kind of helped break me out of that.
That's awesome. Um, so I know you started TikTok. We were talking a little bit earlier that you'd started doing TikTok about a year ago. Is that right?
Yeah, I think a little more than a year around that time.
And before doing TikTok, like how was like social media and stuff for you? did it influence and help you grow a lot by doing TikTok?
Yeah, definitely. In a way that I did not anticipate. Um, Before then, I kind of used social media as a way to sort of track my progress and like in terms of like my technical skills and all that. And I didn't really think about it beyond that. And then like TikTok, I started to gain a little bit of traction on there. And then I noticed that I had put my Instagram on my TikTok, and people, I guess, were clicking. The click through on there was a little bit higher than I anticipated. So
Oh yeah,
yeah,
because
yeah,
it kind of matches like your TikTok and Instagram following. It kind of matches up a little bit.
yeah. I think that a large part of that might be because Instagram has now started with video content as well.
Oh, that's
Or
true. Have you
at
been
least,
posting Instagram reels?
yeah, yeah. I actually enjoy that. It seems to be pretty fun. There's different levels of customization to it.
Right. And do you post like your TikToks, or do you make separate Instagram reels just made for Instagram?
I try to do separate reels because the way I see it is that if someone is kind enough to watch me paint the same thing twice on two different things, then I want to have different clips for them. That way, it's sort of a different experience depending on which platform they go to.
Oh man, that's awesome. Yeah, because I've been just like posting my TikToks because I've been kind of a little bit out of like time for making stuff, and so whenever I make something on TikTok, I just kind of throw it into Instagram. But yeah, I've been knowing that I've been for a while. I'm like, I need to start making like Instagram made content versus just posting whatever from another platform. And I like that idea of like giving people like a reason to follow you on Instagram, not just because you post the same exact thing everywhere, but like that you're a little bit more conscious about giving people like a different experience of your artwork, and that's what brings value to like your other platform on Instagram versus TikTok.
Yeah, I've also noticed that the video quality seems to be a little bit better if I do that because it's not going through two separate things, two separate layers of uploading and then downloading and then uploading again.
Yeah, I definitely have noticed that. That's been my biggest gripe is the loss of quality over uploads.
I definitely do have a couple TikToks that I uploaded to Reels. And well, part of it is because actually, until pretty recently, I was using like an iPhone 5 to record everything.
hmm
Um, and it was like it would hold a charge for like 5 minutes and then crash. And so the camera on there, the footage that it would pick up was not super sophisticated or super high quality. So yeah, those uploading those quality clips onto TikTok and then bringing them over to Reels, it looked like kind of like early YouTube, like early YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. Oh, sorry. I'm talking a lot, but I'm curious about like some of the lighting you have in some of your videos. Do you just use like an open window and just kind of let natural light come in, or how do you set up your videos?
I wish I could say that I had any knowledge of setting up like an environment for that's catered to filming, and I had all this like crazy knowledge about like, okay, I'll put a light here and it'll get this effect. But what seems to be working is natural lighting through a window so far.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Um, as far as that though, I definitely want to learn more about just taking video in general.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely one of my fortes and things that I like am really interested in is like filming and stuff. And like honestly, from what I know, um, is natural light is always better than anything you could ever produce or any light you can buy. Natural light's going to be superior just because it's just the perfect temperature and the light's evenly distributed and it's perfect. Um, So yeah, I definitely think you have a huge advantage just keeping it natural light. It just looks great.
Thanks, man. Yeah, no, I totally noticed that. I would film sometimes at night and use like yellow light from lamps, and it would alter the color because the yellow would get mixed in with the hues of whatever I was painting, and it would be a little bit tricky to rely on artificial lighting in that way. I'm sure there's ways to do it where people who do it professionally would hear that and start pulling their hair out. But you know,
Mm-hmm.
as far as my setup in my apartment, it's like okay, I need to rely on natural light.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Um, and for you, like, what is your kind of like dreams in life? Like, where do you see yourself going? Or are you already living your dreams? I guess maybe.
I definitely want to work on long form projects like children's books, um, possibly a comic. Although I am kind of doing a small thing with a few friends from college. But yeah, definitely something where I create a narrative with my own characters and kind of see it play out from start to finish.
Interesting. And what kind of how would you want to like distribute that? Is it something you would I mean it could be both cuz like I want to make like a webtoon one day and be able to like publish it physically cuz I just think that would be the coolest thing. But for you like how would you envision things getting produced?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it would ultimately depend on what the storytelling medium is. Like if I
Mhm.
were to do a comic, I think I'd be doing a similar thing to what you suggested, which is like maybe like a webtoon format. But if it's a like a picture book for like kids, it definitely feel like reading a physical book to a kid is something that is has stuck around for a while for a reason.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's generally the direction I'd want to go in. Oh, sorry about that.
no, you're good. I was just gonna say with enamel pins and like getting like merch produced, I know how like such a rewarding and prideful feeling it is to like see something go from like paper, like initial sketch to like the digital copy to like having it solid in person. And it's just like such a cool feeling. And it just feels so cool with such like even just small pins. I can only imagine what it would feel like with like a full like children's book. That would be such a special feeling.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. Like there's nothing that can really replace that feeling of flipping through a book. Part of that might be because I grew up reading things in libraries and stuff like that. I'm sure like a lot of my younger students would maybe not be as fond of something like that, but yeah, there is something special about having something physically in front of you.
Right. Yeah, I think that's like super cool. Like it definitely a lot of the stuff that's like, there's a lot of new cool forms of like content like how to watch or read something that somebody makes, but the old school ways kind of stuck around for a reason, just because that's just how we are. Like I feel like screens are cool. Like and this is why I'm like really am excited to talk to you because you're primarily a physical traditional artist, and I think that's awesome as someone who's been pursuing digital art. And since graduating, I haven't like been doing like a lot of physical art. Um, just because in my mind, I'm like, oh, it takes longer and stuff like that. But um, definitely like the payoff is really high. If you do it well, and because like I look at artwork and digitally and stuff. I'm like, that's so cool. But then there's something just so much more enjoyable knowing and seeing that it's physical. That just there's so much more like detail because there's like this kind of like the paper, the tooth of the paper, the texture, and all of that, and just knowing it's all hand done. Just I don't know. It's almost more significant now because most things are digital. That like people are like drawn to uh, stuff that's traditional because you don't get to see that as often anymore.
Yeah, there's something super fun about getting lost in the weeds of what you mentioned, like the texture of the paper and cross hatching and being so involved with what you're doing in a very tangible way. Yeah, I mean, I definitely do love digital painting and drawing for sure. I've actually gotten acquainted with it a lot more recently due to teaching, because I share my screen and I'll draw on my screen and everything like that, or draw using a Wacom tablet and it'll appear on my screen. But I don't think I could ever abandon traditional stuff. It's just too much fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I've been wanting to get into. Like as I love watercolor, um, and painting. Like I don't know, I have a love hate relationship with it where it's like I love it, but then my skills aren't as high as I'd want them to be. So the things that I see in my head, I try to make them on paper, and I'm like, this is terrible. And so
I know that feeling.
it's just like you feel, I don't know, you feel like, oh man, the work that it takes to get these images to actually happen, so much work, and I'm kind of nervous that it's not going to turn out. And then that fear I think has been like stopping me from like even trying. And like I don't know, I really want to get into like gouache. I think I'm obsessed with gouache because it's like the concept of it being like watercolor when you want it to be, and then being like more opaque and like acrylic. It just, I don't know, that blows my mind, and I'm just like really curious to dive into that some more. But I don't know, I really like applaud people that can like work watercolors really well, just because I understand how hard it is, because I took a watercolor class, and like it's so tricky.
It can be pretty unforgiving.
Yeah,
Sure.
because you make a mistake, you're like, oh, it's watercolor, I can't paint over that, that's on the page now.
Yeah, definitely. No, I mean I think it's a little more forgiving than people think, but there
Mhm.
definitely is some moves that if you make them, there's not an undo button for that. So I'm totally with you.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that if it wasn't for art school, that you'd still just be doing ink drawing. So what kind of pushed you into getting into watercolor, and what was your experience learning that, and gaining skill with that medium?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that, well, I used to be terrified of color, actually. I come from way more of a drawing background than a painting background. And I remember doing like oils and gouache and all that stuff, and it making me want to run for the hills a little bit. But there's something about watercolor that pairs in a very gentle way with drawing that was very appealing to me, despite it being like paradoxically so. Or it's paradoxical in the sense that it's like a very unforgiving coloring medium, yet I was drawn to it despite being terrified of color. That might just be kind of my weird personality, but yeah, it's yeah. I guess to answer your question, it definitely was teachers and peers, and also discovering artists that do really beautiful watercolor illustrations. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Like, at least in my mind, like the way like at least you kind of like learn about with art is, if you need to like the drawing is the basics of anything, because even in like painting classes they'll tell you like, yeah, like painting is still drawing. Like you're never gonna get rid of your drawing ability. Um,
totally.
because brush strokes kind of basically equal a pencil stroke, and so if you don't have like your basics of like drawing down, then you can throw color on a drawing, but if the drawing isn't very good, then the color's not really going to help it. So I feel like with your work, it definitely shines through that like your line work and stuff is so good that the colors just complement it. They don't really make it, but they just like say, hey, like they're pointing out like how good the drawing ability is, rather than trying to cover up like the inability to draw.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I one of my instructors told me that it's more about values than it is about colors, which blew my
Mhm.
mind and was very liberating in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what's crazy is just like doing something in black and white, like especially like digitally, because it's just like fast to do, like doing things in black and white, and then like putting color over top of that layer of like doing something in black and white with just values and just changing them to color. It just, I don't know, it's crazy. And then you start to see like, oh, this is darker, but it's also more saturated. That's interesting. And that's something that I always love to look at and to do, like my own artwork, is like doing something like in shadows, for instance, like making it dark but also like more saturated. I don't know. I love that effect of like having shadows be even more saturated than normal. Kind of creates this really cool contrast.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's super fun to push and pull with that stuff. And digital, you really have a lot of freedom to experiment with saturation levels, values, even choices of hues. I have friends that make really weird and interesting color choices where I'm like, oh man, I never would have thought of that, because the watercolor, you don't feel necessarily restricted, but it's just not really what first comes to mind for a lot of interesting choices that digital artists make. So yeah, no, totally.
And that being said, like I'm curious on like the, as I'm sure many people would be, what kind of tools do you use? Like, do you have like a preferred? Because I'm assuming you might use like a color erase pencil, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I've been using like very thin pencils. That's like the name of them. I mean, they are also very thin, but yeah, I use those for an underdrawing, and then luckily with watercolor being so transparent, I'm able to layer it on top, and some of my hatching and drawing shows through. And then what I like to do after that is then go over it and add more texture.
Okay. So, is there a name for? I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, but is there some sort of brand or um, associated with the pencils you use and the watercolor?
Yeah, I mean, I play around with a lot of different brands.
Okay.
I'm pretty consistent with Prismacolors and Winsor Newton paints. Though I
Oh,
also,
awesome.
yeah, I also do like Daniel Smith and Shinhan, and even some of the store brand stuff like the Blick, or I guess Utrecht isn't around anymore, but the Utrecht store brand stuff I still have a few tubes of.
That's awesome. Yeah, those are definitely like the ones that I would go for. Those I would think would be the best, like Winsor Newton and Prismacolors. Those are awesome. And in most of your work, do you go back over in like um back in Prismacolor? Bro, I can't talk right now. Prismacolor. Do you go back and kind of draw in some of the details after watercolor?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that a lot of the watercolor tends to slightly dull the lines underneath. So on top of reinforcing those lines, I'll try and add more texture or more hatching. Sort of depends on how well I feel like the watercolor modeled the form. I'm trying not to
Right.
rely too much on line. I definitely do want the watercolor to do the heavy lifting, but going over it is still like I do love being very self-indulgent with extra details and hatching and all that stuff.
How long does this whole process take you usually? I mean, I know you've probably been doing it a while, so like it's probably gotten a little bit faster over time.
It's a good question. It definitely depends on the scope of the illustration. If it's a floating character with like maybe a flat background, then probably a few hours maybe. But if it's something where I need to do thumbnails and value roughs for like a whole 2-page spread, that might take at least a couple days, I would say.
Hmm. Sounds about right.
Yeah, yeah. It's I'm glad that hair dryers exist. It speeds up the
Oh
process.
yeah. Hair dryers are king.
Yes, absolutely.
Um, and for you, like, what drives you to make art?
Let me think about that for a second.
Yeah, it's a big question.
Yeah, that is
Especially
that.
if you haven't really thought about it in a while. You're like, I kind of just do it and don't really think about it too much.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, um, I wish it was like a super profound thing to say, but it feels weird if I don't draw one day. Um, yeah, I guess a lot of people who do an activity every day that they enjoy, if they like have a day where they don't do it, they kind of feel it in their bones. It's sort of become that way with drawing and painting for me. As far as kind of what drives me to do it, I think think I'm a pretty weird dude, and I love creating weird characters. And yeah, I wish I had like a deeper answer than that. But I guess if I'm being honest, that's kind of what it boils down to, like a desire to tell weird stories with strange characters. And yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's just fun, you know?
totally, totally.
Who says something fun can't be your job?
Yeah, agreed, agreed.
Now, do you have any favorite projects or favorite illustrations you've worked on that are just your absolute, like, this is what I'm proud of, like, this is my favorite thing that I ever done?
That's a great question. I think that I tend to be a little bit hard on my stuff, which I'm sure, anybody who's ever picked up a pencil can relate to. Um, I'm looking right now. Usually, if I paint something, I'll be pretty into it until like 2 months, and I'll be like, "Oof, this is not it right now," and I'll try and make something new. Um, I guess the current thing that I had a lot of fun doing would be that I did a draw this in your style pretty recently, where there was like a cloud with a mustache and a kid reading a map and all that stuff, and kind of coming up with a little story behind those characters, in addition to it being like an illustration that people do in their style. That was a fun little thing to do. Kind of helped me get to know other illustrators that are on the Instagram platform. Uh, on the Instagram platform. Well, that made me sound like I'm 1,000 years old. But yeah, it was a cool way to see, like, wow, I never would have thought of these characters that I come up with in that way. See people's interpretations and their spin on certain things.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love seeing like the process videos. Um, I think it's like so fascinating to see like how other people think. Like people can take like the same like techniques of like how to do something, and then they just switched up, which I think it's what's great about art is like, people are like, well, there's not one way to do art. I'm like, well, technically at first, fundamentally, you gotta learn the basics. But then after that, it's like you can just kind of do whatever you feel like and change it up to like, it's your own thing. It's your little superpower you're in control of. It's just making things happen. And I think that's really cool to see. And in a lot of people's artwork is just the ability to control and manipulate things how they want.
Yeah, kind of what they do with that information and what they want to push and pull and leave alone and make reflect realism, or if they want to go down weird rabbit holes of like infusing more cartoony stuff into realism. Like all those choices are super fascinating.
Yeah. I think that's just so cool. Um, I mean, what's your takeaway from all this? I mean, you have a huge, over 1,000 followers on both Instagram and TikTok. Like, what does that do for you? Like, how does that affect you?
Um, that's a good question. I think it can be very motivating to have people be really kind about what I do. I think it helps push me to make my stuff hopefully even better with the next one. Um, yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing. It's still something I'm getting a little bit used to, just because I kind of did all my stuff in a bit of a vacuum before. The freelance stuff I would do for the agency I freelance for, that would all just be kind of between me and whatever the client was. So this is a little bit different, but yeah, it definitely does feel very motivating, for sure.
That's awesome. And I know you have like a bunch of like prints and stuff. I was checking out your link tree. That will also be put in the description below, if you guys are interested. Um, has has that like been able to help sales and stuff? I guess on the financial aspect of it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Especially through Instagram, I would imagine is where a lot of traffic towards those places come, and that's been pretty cool. It always blows me away when someone wants to support what I do in that way. It's always like, whoa, thanks, because especially these days with like just how hard it is with like COVID and everything like that, the fact that people would want to support what I do, it's like, wow, man, thank you so much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's like one of the most meaningful things. Like, people can like comment on your stuff or like stuff you post, but it's so much like different when they go and like buy the stuff that you're selling on your shops or whatever. Um, I for me, like I've sold stickers and stuff like that, and it's been always like really fun when people are like, I'm gonna buy your stuff right now. I'm like, no way, that's crazy. And then to either see photos or see, or for them to tell me, uh typically during like live streams or something like that is when I get to talk to people. They'll be like, oh yeah, I have it on my brother's phone or something, and he loves it. And it's just crazy to see like where I get to send stuff to different people and get to see them go all across the country. I think that's just so fun to be like, what I'm doing actually matters and people care about it, and that's really cool. Not just that I care about it, but the other people also enjoy it.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. Super cool. Yeah, it's always fun when you kind of create like a weird world and people kind of want to be there with you for at least a moment.
All right. Because I feel like a lot of times art is kind of like a view inside your own head, like the stuff I don't know, like it kind of like your personality shines through, or like how you think about or see the world kind of shines through. Would you say that that's kind of how your art is as well?
Oh man, my stuff's pretty weird. So I mean, yeah,
If
I
you're
guess
weird, I guess that technically is true, right? I don't know.
yeah, yeah. I think that there definitely is a huge reflection of my personality and what I do. Um, I think a certain level of that is definitely inevitable.
Right. Now if there was one character that you would be able to meet in real life and hang out with, who would that be out of all the characters you've created?
Oof, that's a really good one. I've never thought about that. Um, there's like I guess it's kind of cheating to say because I guess it's technically three characters, but I did this watercolor painting of like a jazz band trapped inside of a tree. And it's
I
like
love that one.
thanks, man. Yeah, it's so I maybe that's kind of cheating because it's three people, but I
Hey,
think
it's
they'd
one
be
entity, right?
yeah, yeah. They're kind of all in it together as one symbiotic relationship. So I think hanging out with those dudes would be pretty cool. That or the cloud with the mustache, although he looks a little bit grumpy. So
Yeah, he's like an advanced version of like Goku's cloud that he rides.
yeah, totally.
Better version.
Yeah, one with facial hair.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It always one ups anything if it has a face on it.
I think so.
Now, if you had one word of advice to any aspiring artist out there, what would that word of advice be to anybody that's just trying to get better at art and grow a following or whatever they have that they're trying to do?
I think I might be stealing from one of my teachers, but one thing that, especially when I was new to illustration, I didn't really realize how many drawings I was going to make. So when I would make something and it wouldn't quite come out how I wanted it to, I would always think like, oh man, I wonder if this is like indicative of like my skill level or like where I'm just going to end up in general as an illustrator. But the reality is that if you love this, then you're probably going to make millions of drawings or paintings in your life. And if one of them doesn't work out the way you necessarily want it to, like that's totally fine, because there's millions and millions more on the way. So just keep going and keep making stuff. And yeah, I'm sure I butchered their very beautiful sentiment, but yeah, that's always been a positive thing for me to kind of reflect on.
And that's fantastic advice. Like I feel like I said it a lot, but I guess it's worth saying a lot because I was told it a lot in school. But a lot of my professors would be like, especially painting ones, would say you have to make 100 ugly paintings to get the one painting that looks good. And
Totally.
you know, how many good paintings do you want in your life? And so, you know, we're talking hundreds, thousands, and like you said, you know, just a innumerable amount of images and things you have to sketch and draw and try out, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. I think that's the biggest one. So I feel like that's
Yeah.
been keeping me lately from making artwork, as just kind of being sort of fearful, sort of, for some reason. I don't know, or like the stress of like what I have to do to make the image come to life. It like kind of like stresses me out. I'm like, oh, I don't want to take the time to do that, but it's
No, it's
definitely
totally
something you
real.
have to do.
No, it's totally real. That kind of paralyzing feeling of not wanting to make something that you're bummed out about. But yeah, I think I'm, at least for me, I'm trying to kind of make the effort to enjoy what I'm doing, even if I'm kind of falling on my face. The word being trying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think, and this is something too that I've been like repeating. I don't know. I feel like I repeat stuff uh, in the podcast sometimes, and most of the time it's for myself. But I found that like the best thing that you can do for yourself is to try, because trying is succeeding. Because a lot of times we see succeeding as being like the end goal, but really like being successful is the ability to keep trying and going. Because you'll never succeed or reach, you know, a point of success. And I don't feel like success is like a destination, but like you have brief moments of like, oh gosh, this is cool, like look at what I made. But success is like trying over time, and it's not like a single destination.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Yeah, because then, I mean, that goalpost constantly moves anyways. So
Yeah,
I think
I
it's,
love the analogy of the goalpost.
yeah, yeah. And sometimes it can be a little bit amorphous in your brain too.
Yeah,
So I try to just enjoy the act of making stuff as much as I can. And yeah, try and make that effort too, you know?
right. Um, and I guess we kind of reached the point of the podcast where we kind of want to give you. I mean, not that we haven't already given you like the stage and the platform to like uh talk and everything, but um, you know, now's your time to be able to tell everybody where to find you. We'll have all your links in the description. But if there's any specific places that you'd like people to go check out your work, or how they can support you, or just if there's something you'd want to tell everybody that's listening, now's your chance.
Yeah, thank you guys for listening to me. Sure, I had a lot of uhs and all that stuff.
Oh, we do that all the time.
Probably a few knows in there. I've been trying to keep track of that, so I hope that editing isn't a huge nightmare when it comes to me.
Oh, you're fine. We leave it pretty raw. We come to find that that's the kind of podcast I like listening to. Is just, you know, kind of the raw good stuff, because if it's edited, it should be a video, not a podcast.
Yeah, no, I get you. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Sorry, to answer your question. As far as where people can find me, I think I'm pretty much Johndrawing on everything except Twitter. I couldn't get Johndrawing on Twitter.
Oh,
Whoever the original Johndrawing is, he did something very bad because his whole account got suspended. So I'm like, oh no, what'd you do, John?
You just desecrated the name.
Yeah, it's what sort of malicious behavior did this alternate dimension John do? But other than that, I have a Patreon that's also Johndrawing, and on there I do smaller video stuff, like smaller tutorials and secret sketchbook posts and fun stuff like that. So if you're interested in looking at my stuff, I appreciate you even being interested in it. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're so grateful to have had you on the podcast today. I definitely like enjoyed talking to you. I felt like I asked way too many questions, but I felt like I, you know, gained a understanding of like how you function, and like, you know, always helps me appreciate the artist's artwork when I get to like talk to them and know them personally. It means a lot more looking at their artwork now than it did before, and like definitely inspires me to keep going, to jump back into doing more artwork and trying new things and not being afraid as much, and just letting those weird characters and weird stories come to life.
I mean, I super appreciate it. I appreciate both you guys inviting me on and talking about making weird stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it was super nice hearing about you and everything you do.
Yeah, thanks, man. It was super nice to meet you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming in. And this has been the Digital Pen Pals podcast. Be sure to go check out John down below and all the links in the description. We'd appreciate if you guys go show him some love on the social medias and on his Patreon and shop. But this has been Digital Pen Pals, and we'll catch you next week.
Later.
Bye.